Hey gang, welcome to another episode of Value Added, the real estate podcast. On this week's episode, we're chatting with Brian Briscoe. Brian is one of the four co-founders of Four Oaks Capital. They are a multifamily investment firm focusing on markets in the southeastern United States, particularly in South Carolina, where they've built up a portfolio over the last year. Brian is also a 19-year veteran in the US Marine Corp. So without further ado, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to Value Added, the real estate podcast where we speak with the brightest minds in the world of real estate who provide, create, and realize value in an ever-changing market. And now your host, Nick Walters.
We just took a picture of the real thing, and
Yeah, this is a lot of my memorabilia from my golf days. Mm-hmm. I got a lot of the Ryder Cup. That's Payne Stewart's autograph there.
Nice.
And these two hats behind me. That's Bobby Orr, the old NHL, the Bruin, and then you have Drew Bledsoe.
Oh yeah, nice.
I met them at the golf club that I worked at in college, and then I have my Mississippi State gear behind me, the cowbell and the helmet.
Yeah.
So you're a Utah boy, right?
I'm a Ute. I'm a Utah man, sir. That's how the fight song goes. I am a Utah man, sir, is the first word. So I'm a Utah man.
Where'd you grow up? What town?
Do you know where Layton is?
Nope.
Do you know where Salt Lake City is?
Yes.
About 25, 30 miles north of Salt Lake City.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. I've been pheasant hunting about 40, maybe 45 minutes north of Salt Lake City.
Yep. Probably a lot of fun. Brigham City, Tremont area. That's
Pleasantville. It was called Pleasantville something or other.
Okay. Yeah. Pleasantville is just south of the Brigham City area, but you've got kind of like the marshlands from the Great Salt Lake, the Willard. Probably, yeah. A lot of people do their pheasant hunting out in there. My brother-in-law and my sister. I'm funny. I have actually never been hunting in my life, but I know a lot of people that go up there to hunt pheasant.
Nice.
So yeah.
Well, listen, man. Thanks so much for coming on. We're live, and I want to dive right in.
Okay, let's do it.
Tell the listeners a little bit more about your career up to this point.
Real estate career or other career? What's
the whole kit and caboodle? I want to know. I want to know about your military service. You got 20 years coming up here next year. Mm-hmm. So yeah, tell us a little bit about your military career and how you got transitioned into real estate investing.
I'm going to start a little earlier. I'll tell you how I got into the military too, because that's fun to tell. So I wanted to be a college professor in math. That was my aspirations when I was in college. So University of Utah student. Got 1-2 degrees in math. Transferred to the University of Minnesota. I was in a PhD program, and lo and behold, September 11th happens. World Trade Center goes down. And I call the Marine recruiter, and I'm like, all right, I'm in. Where do I sign? So 19 years and change in the Marine Corps right now, and gave up any aspirations to be a college professor. So the math degrees and the formal training in mathematics has really helped me a lot through both military career and especially investing. But started down the military path, did several deployments, several overseas tours as well. And along the way I decided that I would start buying single family homes. I don't remember what gave me the idea, but there are probably a couple of people who were several years ahead of me in the military service that were like, yeah, I own a home here, I own a home there. And the idea just really appealed to me. I knew real estate appreciated over time, and being a math guy, I really understood the power of leverage. I understood that, if I can put 5-10% down on something that's going to appreciate, my returns are going to be magnified by this thing called leverage. So decided to start picking up single family homes every time that I moved, which on average has been 2 to 3 years, for the last 20. So Did that for a little while. And, all of a sudden banks stopped lending, and, along with banks stopping lending, I had a period where, I was deployed a lot. I was just gone a lot. So, put that on hold until about 2016 is where I really recommitted to getting back into real estate. Did a lot of, self-education, a lot of podcasts, a lot of books, a lot of just real thinking about, what direction do I want to take this? I looked at things like, the subject to the lease options. I looked at, the BRRRR method, fix and flip, just did a real wide look at everything that I could think of as far as getting in, read books on everything, and kept on coming back to multifamily. It was just something that really appealed to me for a lot of reasons. I mean, number one, everybody has to have a place to live. It's a fundamental human need to have shelter, and everybody has to live somewhere. So, in other types of real estate, of commercial real estate, I mean, you've got office, which is, you're really taking a pounding right now. You've got retail that in some areas is really taking a pounding right now. Industrial, which happens to be doing fairly well. But, when you look at real estate, you don't always have to have office buildings. I think, COVID has really kind of accelerated that process where people are teleworking more often than not, and same thing for retail. There's some retail areas that are doing good, some that are doing poorly. So grocery store down the street from me just closed its doors. And, 15, 20 years ago, that used to be the belle of the ball in commercial real estate. You get an anchor store like, a grocery store to come in, and you build your business or your complex around that anchor, and make a lot of money. Anyway, long story short, multifamily kept on coming back up because it tends to be more resilient. It may not have the best returns out of all the property types, but it has the most consistent returns. So dove into that head first and sold my single family portfolio. Didn't have a whole lot, but I had enough to get my apartment investing journey off the ground at least. So I bought into an education program. I did mentoring through Michael Blanc, and just started networking, started trying to meet people. I say a lot, I was looking for three things concurrently. I was looking for my first deal. I was looking for people who wanted to invest in multifamily, and I was looking to build a team. So most of my efforts outside of, life at the Pentagon was focused on those three things, so, and I'll just hit wave tops right here, and you can, dive in wherever you want. But yeah, to make a long story short, I met, a guy named Eric Shirley, who ended up being, one of the four partners in Four Oaks Capital. And he introduced me to Brian and Todd, who were the other two members of our company. So in the last 2 years, we've closed on 168 doors, 4 different apartment complexes. We've got one more under contract that we're going to close on, hopefully early October. We were hopeful it'd be end of September, but the bank's just really slow. And then we have another LOI signed for another 160 something unit. I think it's 167, ballpark. I don't know why. I mean, why would you have an odd number like that? 167 unit complex. It's just, where do you come up with that? But anyway, so that's where we're at right now. We've got a couple irons in the fires, trying to develop a education platform that can, help other people. And obviously by helping other people, we'll benefit as well. So that's where we're sitting right now.
So let's talk about your partnership with the 3 other guys that have formed Four Oaks Capital.
Yeah.
What was the process that you went through to evaluate your potential partners? It sounds like you met Eric first, and then you were introduced to the 2 other guys. But were there any other potential partnerships that you had entertained before them that just for whatever reason, just didn't seem like the best fit?
Yeah, and there were a lot of potentials, so I would go to a lot of the big events, I would go to local real estate meetups where there were a lot of syndicators, every multifamily event that I could get to, I was going to. And I felt that I was going to be strongest at underwriting and deal finding. And so at all of these events, I made very specific, paid specific attention to anybody who said they could raise capital, and particularly the newer guys in the industry. And that was, one of my limiting beliefs was, I'm a new guy without a lot of experience, I'm not going to be, very valuable to the experienced capital raisers. So I started, kind of building my rolodex, so to speak, of, a lot of people right now probably don't know what rolodexes are, but started building my rolodex of potential capital raisers. And, I probably had 5 or 6 people that I would, every week, every other week, just reach out to and, hey, this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm underwriting. Here's where I'm looking. And, my hope at the time was when I get something under contract, I'll get 1 or 2 or 3 of these people who can come in, get this deal across the finish line. I wasn't thinking about forming company. I was thinking about getting the first deal, because that would, and it really does, that first deal kind of unlocks, a career in multifamily, because now you have experience. Now you're able to do it. So, I had a lot of people that I had networked with, and meeting Eric just happened. It was, I met Eric through a online forum. We realized that we were both looking for our first deal in the Carolinas, and so we talked a couple of times, and then one day I realized that, he made a post in one of the forums that gave a little bit of information about a deal that he was looking at, and it was just enough information that I looked at it and I'm like, we are working on the same deal, And
so we should team up and work on the same deal together, right?
Well, that, unfortunately, I didn't think that. I texted him. I'm like, hey, I don't know if you realize it, but we're working on the same deal. And
so I'm gonna beat you at. Yeah. I'm gonna win this deal over you, right?
At the time, it was just like, we were in the same forums, and he had kind of asked for, hey, I have this deal. I have this problem with this deal. What do people suggest? And I'm just like, I really want to help you. I mean, that's really what I came across as. I'm like, hey, dude, I really want to help you, but I'm working on the same deal. So I'm kind of biased here. I don't know I really don't know what to do. I do want to help you though. And his response, he called me after that and we talked for about 10 minutes and, we talked about the deal. We talked about, hey, this is the information I have. This is the information you have. And we started collaborating and he made the point out. He's like, hey, look, we've talked a couple times together. I think you're a great guy, and I thought he was a good guy. And he just suggested, let's collaborate. And it wasn't what I was thinking, but, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, you know what? That's a good idea. I need a partner. In my mind, I was going to partner with somebody who was a self-proclaimed capital raiser, and Eric was, a deal finder. So, a lot of our strengths overlapped, which is probably why I didn't immediately think of, yeah, let's partner on this deal. And I had some illusions of, being the deal finder, being the hunter type, as far as what my role in multifamily would be. And, I think at a certain level, there's a little clash in my mind, some cognitive dissonance, just saying that, maybe he wouldn't be great for you. But when he made that suggestion, I started thinking, I'm like, yeah, why don't we collaborate? And so we agreed to collaborate on one deal. He had already partnered with Brian Mallon. They had been friends for, probably a dozen years prior to that and had decided together to get into the multifamily game. So he introduced me to Brian, and then we put the offer in on that property, didn't get it. And, a couple of weeks later, we put another offer letter in, and then another one, and then another one. And we probably submitted 5 or 6 offers together before we got a deal under contract, And so, the whole time we were collaborating, but, we were still, we were still free to pursue other interests. It's not like we were, going steady at the time. It was like dating relationship. We're just seeing each other. It's like, yeah, I like him. But
so when did you formalize that relationship? Was it after you brought the other 2 guys into the fold, and how did that go from, we'll work on this first deal together, and then how did it turn into a permanent partnership?
Yeah. Well, with the first deal, we realized, with me, Eric, and Brian, we still needed a little help to raise capital. It was going to be $1.5 million. It ended up being a $2 million raise, for crazy reasons. But we realized we need help, and so Eric introduced me to Todd, and there was 4 of us individually working towards the same deal. After working together for several weeks, being on the phone with each other, calling each other, and we had met a couple of times. I drove down to the Carolinas and met with these guys, and then we all went to a big conference in Dallas together. We decided that we, number one, liked each other. We started to trust each other, and our goals aligned. We all wanted to get out of the rat race. We all wanted to get out of our W-2 jobs, and coincidentally, our numbers were all about the same. We were all making about the same amount of money in our W-2 jobs, and so, it wasn't like, one person's going to be happy with, a $50,000 salary and the next person's going to be happy with $250,000. We all had the same number, so our interests aligned, our goals aligned, we liked each other. And, I remember getting called by Eric once, and he's like, hey, I've kind of been talking with Todd about this and Brian about this. And, we haven't all 4 talked about this together, but I like the idea of forming a company together, and, I'm glad he did, because, new ideas like that, it takes me a little bit of time to digest those, to chew on those, and to get used to the ideas. And once again, in my mind, I had kind of dreamed up, Brian Briscoe's plan was X, and Eric proposes Y, it's just like, well, it wasn't my plan, but I started thinking about it, and I realized we had a really good thing going on. I had 3 guys with the same interests, with the same goals, with the same timelines, and, there was a lot of overlap in what we were good at, but there was also, a lot of areas where, we were relying on Todd to do certain things and Brian to do certain things that they were both really good at. And, it ended up being something that I thought, what? I'm going to do a lot better with these 3 than I could ever do by myself. And, so I agreed. We all agreed. We, shortly thereafter, created 4 Oaks Capital. So that's really how it happened.
So let's talk about the skills and the duties that the 4 of you do on a daily basis. You mentioned some overlap, but also some different skill sets that you guys share. Yeah. How do you communicate amongst the 4 of you who's going to do what, and who has the responsibilities of the task at hand?
We have a weekly meeting for the communication, and then we're emailing or texting several times a day. If you were to pull my phone logs at any given time, I'm talking to Eric and Brian and Todd, probably 3 times as much as I talk to my wife. But I guess I don't live with that with them, so that's a little different. But we're talking consistently. We started a weekly call, over like a year and a half ago, that we've very consistently been able to hit until my schedule changed. But we basically decided who's doing what in the business, what our, to use a military term, left and right lateral limits are, where our swim lane ends. And, for the most part, we've looked at what are their key strengths, and time. And that's really been the biggest restraint for me is time. You're aware of this, but there was a 4 or 5 month period where I had, ridiculous hours, working shifts in the Pentagon, and it was, 1 month day shift, 1 month night shift, 1 month day shift, 1 month night shift, and so when I started the shift work, we had to basically sit back down at the drawing board and, when you're working nights, you're sleeping during the days, so we just had to face reality that I wasn't going to be very useful to the daily operations of the company. And so we shifted, so my role has changed, slightly more into the social media aspect. So I'm very active in LinkedIn, and I can post on LinkedIn, anytime I want. I can set up a post to post on LinkedIn. So I've also started the podcast that we're running, which most of the inner workings of the podcast, I was doing at 2-3 a.m. in the morning, over this period of time, on my days off when I was working nights. So we basically have flexed. So I used to be, at first, the first deal that we had under contract, I found it. I did a large portion of the underwriting, assisted by Eric. I led the due diligence. And then after that, we sat back down as a team and we said, okay, how are we going to do this, going forward? We decided Eric would be the asset manager. Excuse me. Eric would be the acquisitions guy. I would be the asset manager. Todd would do investor relations, and Brian was doing everything else. He was doing the website, the portal, the bank accounts, and everything else that didn't fall nicely into one of those areas. So I started out asset managing, and when my schedule changed, Todd took up the bulk of the asset management, and quite frankly, he's a lot better at it than I am. So, I think that ended up being, good for the company. So yeah, that's kind of how the team came together and how we've evolved, and right now Eric is still our acquisitions guy. Todd is mostly our asset manager. Brian Mounds doing a lot of the investor relations. And I'm doing content. I'm doing the marketing. We're also coming up with a education platform that I'm leading on. And once again, that's something that I could do any time of the day, any day of the week.
So tell me a little bit about how your processes and systems have changed now. I mean, I think you guys have closed 3 or 4 deals in the last 9 or 10 months. Have your processes and your systems changed since, that first 55 unit acquisition that you had earlier this year?
Yeah, they have significantly. And, part of it was when we changed roles, it just kind of interrupted things. We were still developing our systems, so as asset manager, I was coming up with, tracking spreadsheets and metrics and everything else, and, unfortunately, when I handed it all off on Todd, he does things slightly different. So there was a little bit of a speed bump there because we had to change roles midstream, but yeah, one of our focuses in the last couple of months has been exactly that, standardizing things, So, now Todd, as the asset manager, is sending out a weekly report on KPIs. Here are the KPIs or the key performance indicators on each one of our properties. So, so yeah, we have that part, which is, very much systematized. Right now we're working on, making sure our due diligence is a little more systematized. So, we've got a due diligence checklist that we use. We have a due diligence process that we use now, so we're not recreating the wheel every time. We have templated folders. Every time we get something under contract, we open up a brand new folder and dump the template in there, so, here's where this goes, here's where that goes. And so it's the same every time we do it. It's not perfect yet, and we're still, really trying to just find our stride on a lot of things. But we're all adamant, we know that to be able to scale, we have to systematize things. And, that's where a lot of our efforts right now, just systematize things so that, we'll be able to increase the amount of acquisitions we can do, increase the amount of assets that we can manage, and potentially bring in new employees to be able to do that for us, and just bring them into our system and, teach them our system and let them take over.
That was the next thing I wanted to ask. Have you hired anybody, whether it's freelance, virtual assistant, any sort of administrative help to help you with that, the back office tasks, those busy tasks that you're probably not good at or you don't have time to do?
We have several, actually. So we've hired out podcast editing. We started with a company and ended up passing that off to my daughter. So my 21-year-old daughter is doing the editing right now. Turns out she's really good at it. We have a bookkeeper that's helping out with the finances. It's not that we couldn't do it. It's just it's kind of tedious. It kind of takes our eye off the ball a little bit. And I like. My partner Todd brings this up a lot. There's an example in Robert Kiyosaki's Cash Flow Quadrant about two guys who get the city contract to provide water, to a city, and one guy buys buckets and starts hauling water buckets, and the other guy, does absolutely nothing or disappears for a year, and when he reemerges, he has a pipeline system, so, and a lot of times we sit down and we have to ask ourselves the question, are we hauling buckets or are we building the pipeline? And that's a question we ask frequently. So, yeah, so we have taken interns on as well. So the UNC college system has internship programs. So we've had a couple of interns come in. One of them was specifically helping Eric with underwriting new properties so that we could underwrite far more properties. So one of the interns would do a lot of data entry. Now we're taking on an intern who can potentially help out with helping us, with our projections and our finance, MBA student. We have done a lot of little things, and we're starting to look at where we need people to help out, where we need more hands to free us up to think more strategically.
Let's talk about your podcast. You have a big following out there just being in business for a few months. It's called Diary of an Apartment Investor. Is that correct?
Yep, that's it.
So Tell me a little bit about, first off, how did you drum up the idea of starting a podcast? Probably very similar to how I drummed it up during coronavirus, but your format is very it's very engaging. It's very unique. You're bringing on two guests during each episode. One an experienced investor, and then one an aspiring investor. Yeah. And you're doing like a question and answer session, which I think is great. So tell me a little bit more about your format and how you came about to start developing a podcast.
So the Diary of an Apartment Investor name does not really connote what we do. And that's, kind of maybe a marketing mistake. But the Diary of an Apartment Investor, the original idea is we were going to kind of detail, different, basically make a diary of what we were doing. Here's how we're doing due diligence right now. This is how we're doing it. We're doing this right now. This is how we're doing it. That was the original idea. And we went to a big conference. It was Michael Blanc's Dealmaker Live. And, we had this idea. We hadn't put a lot of horsepower behind it, but we had decided we were doing a podcast. And everybody there, oh, hey, I'm starting a new podcast. Oh, hey, I'm starting a new podcast, And we saw really quickly that, all of a sudden the multifamily, podcast market went from a few really big players to a whole bunch of people. And so we went back to the drawing board and we said, okay, this idea, we need to talk about it a little more. So we went back to the drawing board, brainstormed about it. And, something Eric and I are both passionate about is being able to educate other people, so we have this idea of education through investment where, for people who invest with us, we will provide them with an education. And so also on my to-do list right now is develop that platform. So, we have a lot of content online that people can, if they want to be a syndicator and they want to invest passively first, they can come to us and then we'll help them. So that was always part of the long-term plan. So we just kind of put the two together and said, well, we want to help people. What's the best way we can do it? And the idea of bringing two people on and having like mentorship on a podcast. I think it was Eric that threw that idea out when we were brainstorming, and it was just one of those things. It was just like brilliant, that's absolutely brilliant. And, Eric was originally going to run the podcast, but when my work schedule changed and the other partners took up more of the load, that fell on me, and it was like, yeah, I can do this. I had a very defined schedule. I knew when I was going to be working 2 months in advance. I'm like, I can do the podcast. So that kind of shifted gears as well. But it's been, I'm actually surprised at how successful it's been. We're less than 90 days in, and I think we just hit our 6,000 download 2 days ago. So, somewhere there's a little black box with a button on it that says magic happens here that occurred between idea and launching.
Well, at the end of the day, it's all about the content and the value that you're providing your listeners. And I'm a regular listener, and I think it's a great format. What is one thing that you've learned from listening to all of your guests? Is there one glaring piece of knowledge or information that you've learned, whether it be from the new investor side or the more experienced side?
Wow. There are so many more than one things, it's just, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is the power of giving back, and being able to help other people and lift other people up, helps you out in a lot of ways too. And I think I originally learned this as a high school student, mentioned I got 2 degrees in math. I was always good at math, but as a high school student, I didn't care for math at all. And I remember when people would ask me, hey, you're really good at math, I'm struggling, can you come help me? If it was a pretty girl, the answer was yes every time, but I learned there that when I helped other people, I learned the material a lot better, so I think that's kind of the glaring thing with running the podcast is, by listening to brand new investors, aspiring investors ask questions, I'm learning the answers and I'm learning more ways of doing things. And, it's just expanded my base of knowledge because, I've interviewed, 50 something people right now. And, most of the experienced investors are actually far ahead of where I am right now. So, I'm getting all these other people who are saying, hey, this is how we do this. This is how we do that. So yeah, overall, I've learned a ton. Hard to put a finger on one thing, but if I had to put it on one thing, it'd just be like the golden rule is golden, help other people out and you'll receive more benefit.
What's been your screening criteria for bringing either experienced or new investors onto your show?
Funny, the line in the sand was when we started the podcast, we had syndicated 3 apartments. So the line in the sand was three deals, it was just like, well, where are we gonna put the line between an experienced and aspiring investor? But there is kind of a gray zone, there's people who've had 1, maybe 2 deals, when someone like that asks to come on the show, I'll get on a phone call with them and just say, hey, look, this is how I do it. I have an aspiring investor and I have an experienced investor on every episode. Which bucket do you think you fall under? And I would let them self-select. And most people who are, in the first, second deal phase are saying, well, you know what? I would really love to be on the show to ask somebody, how I can get to my next step, So the majority of the people who are kind of in that gray zone, who aren't, brand new, who maybe have a couple of deals under their belt, are asking to come in as aspiring investors. So, but yeah, my line in the sand is usually three deals. I've crossed the line once or twice. And I've had, both directions, so aspiring investors who've had more than that and, experienced investors who've had less. So,
well, at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to try to help somebody on either side, right?
Yeah.
But I think anybody who's listening out there should check out Brian's podcast. It's a great one. We're going to close out this episode with the hard-hitting questions. These are the questions that we ask every one of our guests. I'm going to throw an additional one in there based on your military service, Brian. But what is your why? That's our first question.
My why is related to my military service. Because of my military service, I have missed birthdays, I've missed holidays, Christmases, anniversaries, Thanksgivings, 4th of July's, I've missed it all, and there was one point in my life where, I got really down on myself. I just started counting all the events that I had missed. And that was really the moment that I decided that I needed to do something different. So my why is to be able to be with my family on those special events. I don't want to miss another birthday. I don't want to miss another soccer game. I don't want to miss another Christmas with my family. I want to be able to be there for the important events, for the people that I love the most. And that's it.
This is your specific question to you based on we're going to commemorate your almost 20 years of service in the military. But over those 20 years, 19 coming up on 20 years of service, Brian, what's the one trait or skill set or lesson that you've learned or acquired over that period that you've been able to apply to your life?
I would say, in the Marine Corps, we put a lot of stress on attention to detail. You make a plan and you leave no stone uncovered. I mean, there's a time aspect as well. I mean, sometimes you have a lot of time, sometimes you have a little time, but the Marine Corps does really good at impressing on people that you have to pay attention to the little details. So when you train, you pay attention to the little details. When you plan, you pay attention to the little details. And it makes everything a lot more efficient as well, because when it comes time to execute, if you've been paying attention to all the details from day one, when it comes time to execute, you're good. So as we are systematizing our business, we're paying attention to those details, and when we get to the point to where we have something else under contract, all that time, all that attention to detail is going to culminate, and, we'll be able to get the contract signed and get the deal across the finish line.
Is there a book that you've read recently that has provided significant value to your life and or career?
My favorite book ever that has given me the most value is the Book of Mormon. It's a religious text, but by far the most value I've had out of any book.
Besides your alarm clock, what gets you out of bed every morning?
That's it. Just my alarm clock. The Pentagon doesn't. Going to my military job anymore. That doesn't, but really it's this business. I like working in this business. I like getting on the line with people, being on podcasts, running my own podcast, the networking events, that. And the funny thing is I'm an introvert by nature, but I've started to really enjoy connecting with other people. It just takes, a lot of Monster energy drinks to be able to do that better, so to get this introvert out of my shell, I just open up a white Monster energy drink and game on.
I would never guess that you are a born introvert.
True. It is absolutely true. In big conferences, if I have my way, I'm sitting on the sidelines. I'm just kind of watching and I'm thinking, okay, I need to go talk to that guy right there. Okay. Oh, no, he's talking to somebody else. Okay, good. I've got a minute. So that's kind of my natural reaction at big conferences. And, it really takes me a lot of effort to be able to say, I need to go jump into the fray. But quite frankly, over the years, I've gotten a lot better at it. And a lot of the conferences I'm going to, it's third, fourth, fifth iteration of the same conference, and I'm seeing the same people, and that really helps. Seeing people that you already know really helps.
Knowing what you know now, what is the number one piece of advice that you would give your then 21, 22-year-old college graduate self?
Wow. Geez, the problem with that is I don't know if 21-year-old me would have understood it. I would have hoped that my 21-year-old self would have been able to think bigger. All right. And as a 21-year-old, I actually picked up the book, Think and Grow Rich. I read like one chapter and I said, this is a bunch of crap. You can't think yourself to be a millionaire, and I stopped at like end of chapter 1, and I picked up a couple other self-help books like this. I'm just like, what a crock. I think my 21-year-old self really needed to open his mind and understand, the power of mind over body and mind over situation. So yeah, if I could have changed one thing, it just would have been unlock that portion of my brain that realized that, if you think you can, you're right.
I was about 22 when I first read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it didn't translate to me. I didn't understand it until about 5 or 10 years later. And it's still the one book that opened up my eyes to buying cash flowing businesses or cash flowing real estate.
That book prompted me to buy single families, but I remember reading it and thinking, he talks about commercial real estate in there. I remember reading it and thinking, I can't do commercial, but I can probably do single family. So I still didn't have that I didn't have that mindset yet. So,
Brian, how can our listeners get a hold of you or learn a little bit more about you?
So fouroakscapital.com is the website. A lot of what our company does is plastered all over the website. Podcast, as you mentioned, Diary of an Apartment Investor. It's on all major apps. And, if you go to fouroakscapital.com/podcast, that's where we hang all of our episodes. So, you can go to the website, look it up, find out more about us, or, open up your favorite podcast app and type in Diary of an Apartment Investor. And my email address, if anybody just wants to reach out to me directly, is Brian Briscoe at fouroakscapital.com.
Fantastic. Hey, Brian, as always, thanks for the time. Thank you so much for adding your value today. We really appreciate it.
Nick, thank you. I appreciate your time and appreciate you bringing me on the show.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave a rating and a review, which will help us introduce the podcast to other listeners. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which will give you access to other episodes you may have missed. Lastly, if you'd like to learn more about investing alongside us, then head on over to valueaddedpodcast.com. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you next week.